So far, we looked at compositing video, building 3D scenes, including lighting and texturing them. Now it is time to make things move. One way to give motion to our objects is using modifiers, which are data generators that you can use to drive node properties, including their position, size, rotation, and more. In fact, you can use modifiers for almost everything in Notch, not just motion. This chapter is another workshop, so as always, I encourage you to follow along and feel free to pause and rewind. Hello and welcome to Chapter 6, Modifiers. In this chapter we will talk about alternative ways of animating elements in Notch instead of using keyframes. Before we get started, I think we should make sure that all our assets are ready to use. I see that Dark Sky Loop is actually marked up red, so we need to re-establish the path to this file. So I'm going to right-click and go for Find Missing Resources. And I'm going to navigate to my asset folder. I think now we are ready. So we're going to start with the blank page and we're going to talk about modifiers in a very simple setup. So we're going to start with Shape 3D because we do need something to animate. So this will be a perfect item. I'm going to turn on the grid, so Alt-G. So let's animate this sphere. Let's start with a matte modifier. So matte modifier is a function that oscillates in between several values. In this case, it's just two values, the top and the bottom value. And it's going in a matte function sine. We have quite a few matte functions to choose from. They all have a good reason to be here and they all fulfill different tasks. We're going to talk about quite a few of them in this chapter. We have an option to choose the scale, speed, and even time offset of this sine wave. I think it will make more sense when we connect it to the Shape 3D. So Shape 3D has a lot of properties to itself. We can pick and choose any of those to be connected and controlled by modifiers. So for instance, I want to control the position X of this Shape 3D. All I have to do is grab the matte modifier and connect it to that property that I want to animate. And if I hit space or playback, I see that it's already working. So now the shape is oscillating from -1 to 1. We can change the matte function. Different functions evokes different animations. Let's stick with sine. So by default, we only saw one pin open as an input. Now we have two. In fact, we can have quite a lot more. So if I double click on the node, I can see all the available pins for modifiers to take advantage. Now, this list and this view is a little bit excessive. I don't think it's the most comfortable way of working. That's why I would always recommend connecting your modifiers directly to the property via the Properties window. We're not bound to one modifier per one shape. We can actually use several modifiers on one shape. For instance, I want to drive the position Z with a separate modifier, and I'm going to do exactly that. So I'm going to grab the math modifier and I'm going to connect it to the position Z value. I see this working. I'm going to give it another type of math function, for instance, square. In the very same fashion, we can use same modifiers to drive several shapes. So if I grab yet one more Shape 3D, connect it to the root, I'm going to make sure to offset it a little bit to the side so we see them both well. And I'm going to set it to a box. I want to drive the position Y of this new Shape 3D with the new math modifier that I just created. This is a perfect way of making repetitive animations. Imagine if you needed to keyframe, let's say something like the sine wave. There would be at least two values and they would be in Bezier shape and there would be an enormous number of them in the timeline. So changing the speed or the scale of it would probably end up being quite a nightmare. Right, so this is a perfect moment to mention nulls in 3D and parent-child relations of shapes. So if I type in null, you will see that there's quite a few options and we've tried at least one of them, which was video processing, video null. In this case, we're going to go for geometry null. So think of null as a position value. It doesn't hold any geometry, it just defines where things should be. And you can connect things via null. So I'm going to grab yet another Shape 3D. And instead of connecting it to the root, I'm going to connect it to the null. So now I offset the shape 3D. This null is acting as a little gimbal, as a little handle for me. All of a sudden, I can offset and animate this shape 3D via changing parameters in the null. Let's add another type of modifier into this setup. Let's add continuous modifier. So continuous modifier does exactly what its name states. It just continuously spits out information. So in this case, it's super slow. I think I can increase the speed of this continuous modifier. So I'm going to bump it up to 15. And as you see now, we are already animating the shape 3D, which is turning around the center of the graph via this null. So we can use a null to connect shapes, but we can actually use the very shapes to connect one to the other via parent-child relation. So I'm going to bring in yet another shape 3D. And I'm going to connect it from this one that we already have. So now these two shape 3D shares their positional and rotation values. So for me to be able to see this new shape 3D, I have to offset it from its original point. We can add more and more of these parent-child relations. In fact, I might as well add one more level here, and I will use this shape 3D as a positional gimbal, and I'm going to rotate a box around this sphere with the heading property. So I'm adding yet one more shape 3D. I'm going to set it to a box. I'm going to offset it from the original point, and I'm going to use the same math modifier to drive a heading property. So before we move on to a bit more complex and practical setups, let's talk about one more modifier that will be very handy. Envelope modifier. So envelope modifier is a virtual slider. All of a sudden you can control the parameters just by changing its value. I think I want to control the positional value of this null, so I want to change its position Y via envelope. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to grab the envelope modifier and connect it to the position Y of this null. I'm going to put it somewhere here so it would be a bit more clear what's going on. Right, so now as I'm sliding this slider, all of a sudden I'm changing the positional value. In fact, I can increase the scale so it goes a little bit higher up. So think of these three modifiers as main building blocks in building a little bit more complex setups. As if we were to go to modifier list, you would see that there's quite a few of them to choose from. Some of them require information coming in. Quite often that information is deriving from math, continuous, or envelope modifiers. And that is exactly why we cover them here in a very simple setup. So we're done covering basics. Let's move on to a bit more complex, bit more practical setup. Hello and welcome back to the modifier chapter of this essential course. In upcoming workshops, we will have a starting point and a finish point. And we're gonna cover the basics of how to use math and continuous modifier in the scene. So with that said, I invite you to open the to math continuous start and let's get started. Right, so we do have several nodes here in the scene, so let me walk you through on what we actually have here to work with. First of all, here on the side, we have a little lighting setup, so I'm just gonna move it away. We're not gonna be referring to that now. Then we have a little camera setup, and the camera is not connected directly to the root, it's actually connected via null. So the null is in the center of the scene, and camera is offsetted from that center point. Via the same null, there is a shape 3D connected to, so we're gonna work on that. We're gonna make some animations here. Then we have a little setup right here of parent-child relation. So we have a null driving the positional value. Then we have a shape 3D set to a box, and that box has a couple of children of its own. So it kind of has little handles here on both sides. We will animate these shape 3Ds as well. And if we pan a little bit lower, I see that we have imported 3D scene, and it contains a 3D model that has a whole bone structure, a material, and that material has a color texture. Color texture is built from a Truchet generator. We probably will be able to animate that as well. And here in the bottom, we have a floor. We will animate the motion of the floor as well. Right, so let's get started somewhere. I think the best place to start would be this shape right here. So I'm going to press 5 So we're in a more static setting, in a orbit view. And let's start animating things here. First of all, I think I would like this to spin around its axis. So the whole rig right here could just go round and round in a heading property. So let's grab a continuous modifier for that. So I'm going to connect it to the rotation heading value. First of all, I'm thinking I should set it to 0 maybe. And then I can connect the continuous modifier. It is moving, but it's ever so very slow. So I think I'm going to increase the speed to 15. There we go. So the next thing I would like to animate would be the pitch of this shape right here, of the actual cube or rounded box. So I'm going to use the pitch property for that, and I'm going to use Math Modifier to drive it. So shape 3D, pitch. Again, this could be a little bit bigger in scale. I would like to see more of that motion. I think bigger still. Yeah, 50 looks all right. 50 looks fun. So as you see now, we're moving this shape right here, and this shape is actually moving its children and children of their children. Since these two shape 3Ds don't really change any positional values, they look quite static. I think we could animate both of these shape 3Ds on a rotation bank value. Let's do that. Let's use Math Modifier. In fact, we could easily use the same Math Modifier to drive the rotation bank of these shape 3Ds. I don't want to animate these shape 3Ds one by one. I want to animate them at once. I'm going to mark them both up, and I'm going to use Math Modifier to drive rotation bank. I think I need a bit bigger digit here, so I'm going to increase the scale to 50. 50 might be a little bit too much, so how about 30 and a little bit slower? So I'm going to decrease the speed. Yeah, I think 0.5 works here well. Okay, so we have a little bit of fun happening here. Let's move on to something else in the scene. We have a guy walking, but the floor is not moving with the walk cycle. We could address that, we could fix that. So let's just find the floor. First of all, we should rotate it towards the direction that he's walking. There we go, this looks about right. So how do we animate the floor? Well, material has a property called UV offset, and I think that will be exactly it. That's exactly what we should focus on. So UV offset Y seems to be going in the direction that we desire. So I'm going to use a continuous modifier there. There we go. It's a little bit fast though, so I think we could reduce the speed. Perhaps something like 0.5? It's still quite fast. How about 0.05? Yeah, this looks correct. This looks much better. I see that we have a color texture on the model. We could actually animate this color texture as well. So if I go a little bit higher and find the truchette that is responsible for this pattern, I could probably tweak its thickness. Why don't we use Math Modifier to drive its thickness going up and down in width? So let's connect that Math Modifier to thickness. Oh, it's a little bit too fast and a little bit too strong. First of all, let's reduce the scale quite a lot. Yeah, something like this. 0.1 actually works well, and it could be slower. There we go. So now we have a little bit more dynamics in the scene. That's great. Another thing that would be fun is spinning a camera around all the scene. We can actually do that with this setup right here. In the previous workshop, we've spoken about setting up a null as a gimbal for a shape 3D, which is actually happening here as well. But in this case, we have a camera which is parented by a null as well. So with that said, if we are changing the heading property, we are actually moving the camera too. I think it's further visible if I just pan out a little bit higher. So let's set a continuous modifier and let's spin that camera. I'm going to make sure that the starting point here is 0. So I just connected continuous modifier to the rotation heading. I'm going to click on the value and I'm going to set 0 as a starting point. Right, now I'm going to click 0 on the numeric pad to activate the camera. And I'm going to make sure to give a little bit more speed on the modifiers, maybe 20. I can even change the direction, for instance. Modifier operation now is set to add. If I set it to subtract, it will just start going the opposite way. Great, that's exactly what I wanted. Now, I'm not necessarily happy with the fact that we have a plane here for the floor. It would be much nicer if it was a circle. So I'm thinking to press 5 now again and to fix exactly that. So in the shape 3D, I see that it's set to a plane. I'm going to change that to a circle. Yeah, this looks better. It looks a little bit rigid. It looks like it's lacking geometry, and I think it is because it's only 20 subdivisions. So if we subdivide it to 90, this will look much better. In fact, we could make the whole floor a little bit smaller. There we go. Right, I think now we're definitely ready to move on to the third and final workshop of this chapter, where we will grab a setting that we had in a lighting chapter and we will just bring it up to life by animating lights and post effects. Okay, here we are, the last workshop of this modifier chapter. In this workshop we will animate some lights, we'll animate some camera motion, we'll add some post effects and animate them as well. There is no strict brief here, we're just gonna have some fun with the knowledge that we gained in all the previous chapters. So again, we have a finish point, or a reference of a finish point, and a start point. Let me walk you through the start point then. So I'm opening the fourth layer here, animated building start, and let's see what we have here to work with. So here in the very top I see that we have a little setup for the background. So this is responsible for the image plane outputting these clouds. So here we go, we have this little cloud loop going on in the back just to add dynamics to the background. Great. We have one light I see here on the side, which is on the gimbal, which is on a null. That's very nice. I think we're going to take advantage of that surely. Then we have a couple of area lights here on the left-hand side. That's good. We're going to take advantage of those too. And then we have 5 lights generally lighting up the scene. So we will be able to animate them one by one or all of them together as we please. There is this 3D model that we've used in the previous chapter, which was a lighting. It does have a material, and material has a color texture befitting the building's UV map. Great. And then we have a camera. Camera is on the null as well, so we will use this as a gimbal. And we have quite a few post effects attached to the cameras. And the reason why we have post effects attached to the camera is so we could pan out to the orb view and it wouldn't be intrusive in our work, in our animating workflow. All right, so with that said, I think we're ready to start. I think the easiest thing here would be to start with the lighting. Now, since there's quite a few lights already in the scene, I'm just gonna disable quite a few of them, and I'm gonna work with them one by one. So all of these lights, I think I'm just gonna kill off for now. So Control 1. Let's see what we have here on the null. Right, I definitely want to animate this heading property of this little setup here of the null with the light. I'm going to be quite pleased with the way it is going to turn around. So we did this already quite a few times. There's nothing new. Start playback. I already see that it's a bit too slow, maybe a bit faster, maybe 30. So now we have one light that is spinning round and round. I just pressed 0 to see the final output, the final setup. Let's see how it looks. Great, so this is quite nice. What else do we have here in lighting? We have 2 area lights. So there's a top one and there's a bottom one. I think it would be cool if they would turn on and off separately, sort of like a little chase. So once one is on, the other one is off, and so on and so forth. We can set that up with the matte modifier. So I'm going to use matte modifier to drive the brightness property. I see that the brightness property is set to a rather high number. 3 and 2. Right, so I'm gonna grab the area light and I'm gonna set the brightness to 0 as a starting point, and then I'm gonna feed in this matte modifier there. Now, since it was set to a 3, to a numeric value of 3, I think I'm gonna match that up here as well. So it's gonna be 3 in scale on the matte modifier. It's rather fast. I think I want this slower, so 0.5 there. Yep, this is pretty good. Okay, so now I will just make a copy of this matte modifier. And I'm going to connect it to the brightness of this area light. So let's again zero this out. Let's connect it to the brightness property. And I'm going to decrease the scale to 2 because the area light was set to a brightness of 2 originally. So there's two ways now I can make this chaser. Now, obviously, they are both lighting up at the same time. I can either set it to cosine, or I can leave it on sine, but I can offset it in time. So there's a property called time offset. So I could set it to 0.25 or 0.5, for instance. I think 0.5 works. I'm just going to leave it at that. Cool. So let's move on a little bit further. Let's animate something else. Let's add more lighting. Let's see what those two lights do. Actually, this is very intrusive now. I'm just going to disable those two to see these ones better. They are very ambient. I think I'm just going to leave them on for the whole time. These are very ambient as well. They might as well be on continuously. Just no motion whatsoever. Let's see how it looks all in action. So this red light right here, it's a little bit too harsh for my liking. So I think I'm going to reduce the scale after all. Maybe 1 here. No, so maybe a better choice is to reduce the speed. What about 0.2? Like really slow. Actually, 0.2 would work here as well on the other light. So I'm going to do that. Speed 0.2. And in fact, I don't want them to dip to complete black. I want them to always be visible. So instead of using the absolute value as it is now, I'm going to use the or actually, I'm going to use the absolute value. I'm just going to ignore the all minus values. So all of a sudden, it's a little bit brighter. You know what? Maybe it would be interesting if the bottom one would be shimmering as if it's a short-circuited light, like if it's a light that is about to go out. So I can fix that in a matte modifier. I can set it to random noise, for instance. Yes, this definitely works better. Now we're talking. Slower, please. Maybe it could be a little bit more gradual. So instead of random noise, it could be Perlin noise. Yeah, I start to like this. This was a journey. I misled you quite a few times here, but here we are. I think this definitely works. This is much more fun than it was before. Okay, so what else can we do here? Now, we have a couple of FBX models available. We could populate the scene with some humanoids. There is one called Talking. Well, let's grab that one. Just pull it from the resources, and I'm going to connect it to the root. I think, just like any other 3D object, it came into the very center of the graph. That's exactly it. That's why we didn't see it from the get-go. So I'm just offsetting it a little bit to the side here. So he would have this space. Maybe I should turn him around. And obviously I need to change the animation set to make some, so it actually looks like he's doing something. And he's right there having a conversation with himself. It's probably quite boring. Let's give him a colleague, friend to talk to. Let's make that friend a little bit ignorant. Let's make sure that the friend actually talks on the phone. So I grab the asset called Talking on the Phone. And I'm going to place this body of his right next to him right here. Let's change the take as well. And let's rotate him. So I would understand why the first one is a little bit upset with the second one. This one is completely ignoring his friend. They just Yeah, that happens. Well, let's add one more. I think we have something with the sitting setting. Yeah, there we go. Sitting idle. That's going to work well. Again, that came into the very center of the graph. I'm not going to position it just yet. I want to see how does it look when he's sitting. Okay, so it's like that. Well, let's put him up there in the very top. There he is. He's having a bit of fun sitting there. Cool. All right, so now the scene is a little bit more dynamic. I think we could work a bit on the background. It would be nice to have something there in the back. We could probably add a shape 3D and set that shape 3D to a ring, for instance. Again, very center of the graph, not visible because it's inside of the building. But if we pan it out, make it bigger and change it into a ring. Well, now we don't see it, and that's because we need to change the axis. I think we're gonna go for Z, but I think we need to pan it around to 180. There we go. Definitely it. Now it's definitely working. I think I'm gonna pull it back, make it yet again bigger. The inner range could be smaller. In fact, we could have a starting angle. We don't want this closed off. And it's really edgy here, so let's add more subdivisions, 90. Okay, this is starting to get somewhere. I think I'm gonna grab a material. And I'm gonna connect it to the newly made shape 3D. The reason why I want material is so that I could set a little bit of emissiveness. So this is not global illumination, but it's just a little bit more prominence, a little bit more visibility towards this ring right here. And we absolutely have no reason to keep this static. It might as well be turning on a banking axis. So continuous modifier, and let's connect it to the bank. There we go. Perhaps a little bit faster, please. Maybe 20 in speed. All right. I think it might be fun to have one more of these quite close up. Yeah, let's do that. I'm going to make a copy, make this smaller, but the inner range or inner ring a bit bigger. There we go. I'm gonna make a copy of this material because I want to make another color. I like the fact that it's set to emissive, just I want another type of color. So maybe red. And I could use the same continuous modifier, but I will not because I want this to move a little bit faster and maybe the opposite direction. Let's see. Let's just offset the starting point too. Okay, there we go. So I'll set the operation to subtract. So it's doing the exact opposite. In fact, you should be doing it faster too. There we go. Now it's getting to a point where it's a little bit more interesting. What else can we do here? Well, we do have a camera. We have a ton of post effects, but before we start to mess about with post effects, we might as well attach some elements to it. We are not bounded to adding just post effects to camera. We might as well add shape 3Ds, for instance. We just have to pull it backwards a little bit. And maybe set it as well to a ring, because why not? Again, we need to pivot it. -90. I'm holding shift while I'm changing the rotation, so it actually would go in increments of 15 degrees. I find it faster and easier than setting it manually without a shortcut. Cool, this works. Let's make it bigger. The inner range smaller. More subdivisions. And in fact, this one could share a material from the previous setting, so maybe this one. All right, cool. And we can add even image planes, for instance. Image plane. So I'm gonna grab that, connect it to the camera as well. Again, we need to push it backwards, or in this case forward, on the position Z. What should we pipe to this image plane? I see we have this square hood image, so I'm gonna connect that. Cool, I think this will work quite well for us. I'm gonna press E and position it a little bit on the side. And I'm gonna change the blend mode here because I don't want that black background at all. So I'm gonna go for additive, for instance. Let's make it smaller. So why on earth did we go through this effort of connecting things to the camera? Well, basically now, if we are pivoting camera, since these elements are connected to the camera, they stay static. So this is just a good way to manage your setup. For instance, if I was to connect this image plane to the root, there it is connected to the root. I'm just going to make sure that it's in a 0 position. This is just a showcase element now. Make it bigger. So if I pan around the camera now, you see the UI element is actually moving. And if I connect it to the camera, it's static because it's camera that is moving around. So anything attached to that becomes static. But to be fairly honest, I kind of like the fact that it's moving. So I'm just going to leave it there. And maybe I'll set it a little bit to the side. I'm going to add something else instead to the camera so it would be static. I think I'm going to add another image plane. And I'm going to use another element as a static element connected to the camera. There we go. We do have this 06 ring 1. That's probably going to serve us well. Yes, let's make it bigger. There we go. This works. Well, it kind of works. I don't necessarily like the color palette here. I think I'm going to go for tint post effect to change it up a little bit. Let's bring it closer to the rest of the setting. Red, orange, blue, light blue, orange. Orange it is. Fine. Maybe it could be a little bit lower. Cool, and it could spin. So continuous modifier. Let's find the correct rotation. The correct rotation will be bank here. Right, so let's move the camera a little bit as well. I think it would be nice if it was moving somehow. What should we do? Well, heading probably with the math property. Let's zero this out. So if you have some kind of a parameter set to a specific property you want to drive, and you add math modifier will regard this numeric value as its starting point or 0 position. So check this out. Now we are a little bit on the side. That's exactly why I zeroed it out. So I just press on the value, make sure that the starting point is 0. And now I can increase the scale of this motion, maybe decrease the speed to 0.1, so it's rather slow, but it could pan a lot more. So then. All right, cool. This is getting somewhere. How about a little bit of a motion on the pitch? New math modifier. Pitch. Ah, it's way too fast. I want this bigger, maybe 3, and I want this slow, so 0.05. Notice one interesting thing that happens anytime I roll out of time. By the way, I'm pressing Ctrl-Alt to expand the timeline. Notice the math modifiers that we have in the scene. What's going to happen once we're going to hit the 30-second mark? They jumped. Now, why did they jump? Now, why did our math modifiers disregard the continuity of the looping? That is because that every single math modifier has a property called a time mode. So by default, it's set to lock to time code. But if you set it to use deltas, I'm going to make sure to do that to all of my math modifiers. I think that's it. I only have 1, 2, 3, 4 at the moment. Now, if I run out of time, it doesn't really change anything. It just continuously rolls forward because we are using deltas. We don't really care about time anymore. So this ring, this red outline, that's not necessarily nice. I think I'm going to get rid of that. There we go. Now, post effects. What can we do about the post effects? I think it would be nice to have some of them turning on and off, let's say on demand. That's exactly where we could use the envelope. So I'm going to grab an envelope modifier. And I see that all post effects has a shared value called active. So we could use that. Or at least quite a few of them has a blend amount. So I think blend amount in this case is a nicer thing to use with the envelope because we can gradually turn it on and off. Let's just make sure that all of them have blend amount. So 3D object outline does not sharpen. This one and this one and this one, all of them have blend amounts. So I'm going to mark them all up and then grab envelope modifier and I'm going to pipe it to the blend amount property. Again, I have to make sure that the starting point is 0. So I'm marking it up, hitting 0, and we're done. Now we have an envelope modifier to turn on all of these post effects. So for some of you who work in a touring business, you guys probably use something like MIDI controllers or OSC controllers or light discs. In fact, Notch supports all of that. So you can grab a MIDI modifier or you can grab a OSC modifier, and the logics of connecting them is just the same. So basically you find a property you want to drive and you connect it to that specific modifier. Now when it comes to MIDI modifier, you just have to go to devices, audio and MIDI and make sure that you actually have a MIDI device selected. It will come here. And once that's done, just choose a rotary knob or a slider and press on a listen for channel and you're pretty much set. That slider right there is already working with your MIDI controller, with your MIDI modifier. Now OSC modifier is a little bit more complex, hence it requires setting it up a bit further. So under the protocols, you would have to enable the OSC protocol, check which port is the receiving, which one is the sending one, and then in accordance to the app that you're using for your OSC setups, you would address the IP address of your machine. And you would be able to write in the OSC address here. So something like layer 1 / slider / 0 or 1 or whatnot. Now, if you would like to learn more about the MIDI and OSC setups and how to exactly use it, you can easily go to our YouTube channel. And we have a stream called Dynamically Controlled Live Motion Graphics. So here we discuss all the best practices of how to connect these modifiers to your setting and how to drive them. Right, I think this is a good time to talk about a couple of a little bit more complex setups. As I mentioned in the beginning of the chapter, some of these modifiers has to be chained up to achieve a little bit more complex animation or operation. In this case, I would like to have this data mosh post effect appearing on the screen randomly. Let's just make sure that it's using scene motion vectors and perhaps has another blend mode so we retain the visibility. There we go. So I want this post effect to appear randomly on the screen. I don't want this to turn on and off with the matte modifier. I literally want this to appear once in a while, and I want to be in control on how often that once in a while happens. I think I'm going to rig it up and then I'm going to explain you exactly what I did. So we will need a matte modifier as a starting point, and then we're going to send the matte modifier to the condition modifier. So condition modifier is a little bit different than matte modifier. As you see, it has two inputs. The first one is value. So we want to take the value of matte modifier and then condition it to do a specific thing that we ask of it. In this case, I think I want this condition to drive the, well, let's go for the active property. So I'm going to connect it there. So obviously the active property of the motion data mosh should be set to 0 as a starting point. So 0 right there. Right, so what should be this condition? Condition has a threshold. So we can actually set some kind of a numeric value, let's say scale of 10. And every time the condition modifier receives the information from 0 to 10, when it reaches the threshold of 8, it should be outputting the value of 1. Okay, cool. It is working to some capacity, but I don't think it's actually doing what I requested yet. That's because we should probably work a bit more on our math modifier itself. So in a math modifier, we could set it to random noise. So now we have a very good visual representation of numeric values. So this is literally 0. This is likely 10. This is 9. I'm quite certain this should be 7 or 8. So all of a sudden we are outputting numeric values from 0 to 10. And as we are outputting the scale from 0 to 10, it goes to the condition modifier. Once it's grabbed by condition modifier, every time the numeric value is above 8, it actually outputs the command to turn on this post effect. So let's just track the numbers. Now it's off. That's probably 7, 7, 6. Oh, that's 9, and that's 9, and this is 9, and this is 10. So yeah, there we go. We built our very own little condition modifier. So let's just slow it down. All right, this is working. Sweet. So another a little bit more complex setup that I would like you to be aware of is the smooth envelope. So let's start with the envelope. And perhaps let's connect this envelope to a position Z property. So I want to be able to go back and forward with this setting. So I think I'm going to bring it back to the 0 state. And I'm going to connect it to the position Z. So now when I drag envelope, I'm going back and forward. This actually could be bigger, maybe 2. So I set the scale of 2. So this is working, but I don't want this to be so abrupt, so sudden. I want this to gradually get there. I want to build something of a Bezier curve. That's exactly where smooth envelope modifier comes in. So if I pipe in the envelope that I have to a smooth envelope modifier, all of a sudden, as I'm changing the value, it's gradually getting there. I'm going to change it yet again. And you see now we are gradually going up or down, so on and so forth. I think I'm going to increase the attack and decay so it actually gets there faster. So we ended up building a couple of controls. So we have this envelope modifier that zooms things in. We have an envelope modifier that turns on and off all the post effects. I'm going to just put them all a little bit to the side. And I think we have one more. Actually, we could even set an extra envelope modifier which would turn on and off this post effect. So if we have the active property driven by this condition, we could have an envelope modifier that drives the blend amount property. So let's set it up there. Let's set 0 as a starting position. Let's see. Now we have this randomization on. And now we have this randomization off. Cool, that's great. So we build all those controls, but there's very little fun of using envelope modifiers here in Notch UI. So let me show you a little neat thing that Notch offers. Let me introduce you to Web GUI. So Web GUI will allow you to control all of these parameters from convenience of your web browser. So basically you will have a virtual controller that via IP you can use, you can control from your phone, from your tablet, or from the very same computer you're using for this workshop. So let's set it up. First of all, I think I'm going to start with just one property. So what I want to control from the Web GUI is the visibility of these post effects. So I'm going to press on the question mark and I'm going to expose the property. I think I should set in a minimum and maximum value too, as it is only the 0 to 1. I'm going to call this post effects. And group name, well, that could be the same. Post effects. Okay, so now under the project settings, I'll just make sure that the Web GUI is enabled. Web GUI has its own port number. So default number is 8910. That's good. So now if I grab my web browser, open a new tab and write in local host, double column 8910. All of a sudden, I have that very property that I opened available for me to animate. So if you're doing a presentation for your customer and you have to show the setting that you build, or if you want to give a control to your to your customer. That's just a very, very nice way of doing that, saying like, hey, do you want to control the visibility of the post effect? So just type in this IP number, double column port number, and you are good to go. You are inside of my machine making changes and alterations. Cool, let's open a couple of more parameters. In this case, the pan back and forward. Yep, question mark, expose property. Again, the 0 to 1 minimum and maximum value. Let's call this camera zoom. As soon as I open this property, and if I come back to my web browser and refresh it, all of a sudden that property there is available too. And if you have a touchscreen based laptop, for instance, or Windows Touch based, all of a sudden this becomes a definite, real virtual controller. You can even expand the view and have it looking as a rotary. Right, so before I leave you in peace to further explore these settings, I'm going to mention a couple of things about management of your node graph. In this case, having 3 envelope modifiers says very little for a person who would take over your file, or you yourself if you open it in a half-year time. So for instance, this is camera zoom. So it would probably be quite smart to rename this instead of envelope modifier to a camera zoom. So I just hit F5 to access this property of renaming the node. But you can do the same thing by right-clicking and going for node settings. And this, if I recall correctly, this is the post effect. So F5, post effects. And this right here, I recall, was the option that enables the data mesh to be visible. So I'm going to call this data mesh. Cool, so this is a little bit easier now to navigate and understand. Let's be consistent. Let's add a capital to camera. So now it's a little bit easier to understand what's going on with the patch, especially if you're passing on this design to someone else and you want to say like, hey, the only things you should be concerned about is these envelopes. So these are the controls that you want to play around with. Actually, to make it obvious, you can use another node, which is called region. So region node allows you, or region set allows you to mark up specific points in the node graph. You can change the size of the text. You can call this, for instance, controls or control, and you can give it a color, a custom color of your choice. Well, let's make it red. And to top it off, we can always add a little comment saying, hey, these are the controls of the setting. And obviously we can change the size here as well. So in the long run, this will help you lots. I just felt like it's definitely worth mentioning from the very get-go. Right, so we've spoken about math and continuous modifier quite a lot in this chapter. We briefly touched on condition, and we briefly touched on smooth envelope, and we tried out envelopes, and we actually exposed those envelopes for web GUI use. There are great many of other modifiers that will come handy, and there are some logic nodes that would correspond with quite a few tasks that will come up as a necessity in your work. I would say the best thing to do is to just check it out in the manual, read up about it, and see the samples that are pre-built by Notch team. Now, if you want to dive in a little bit deeper and reading manuals is not your thing, I can definitely recommend to, again, check out our YouTube channel. And there we have 1 hour talk about various modifier setups, from simple to quite complex. So it's me and my colleague Ryan blabbering about all the fun and crazy that can be achieved with modifiers. So with this told, I think this is a good time for me to leave you alone in your further explorations and get ready for the next chapter. And the next chapter on our list is particles. I think we're going to have quite a bit of fun there. So yeah, see you there in a moment.